note is that just like science, Vedanta too has rejected the simplistic idea of the creator God. The reason for this is as follows. Consider this picture of a potter creating pots. Vedanta says that we cannot envision God to be like this potter. In other words, we cannot think of God as being an outside supernatural person who created the universe just as a potter creates his pots. Because if God was like this, then two things need to exist separately. The first is God the potter, and the second is the clay or the material out of which he fashioned the universe. So we have God on one side and matter on the other. Now at this point, a question arises. How did this matter or clay that God used to make the universe come into existence? If we say that God must have created it, then a counter question immediately arises. Out of what? Since something cannot come from nothing, there must have been some prior substance out of which God created matter. And if this prior substance exists, then a new question immediately arises. How did this prior substance come into being? This line of reasoning continues till infinity, and we see that the two separate existences of God and matter can actually never be reconciled. So the correct view according to Vedanta philosophy is that God has not created the universe out of some external substance, but he himself has become the universe and everything in it. The entire universe is not a creation but a manifestation of the Lord. So God is not the creator but the manifester. It is God himself who has become the earth, sun and moon. He alone has become the sky, air and water, and it is God himself who appears as plants, animals and humans. But how is this possible? Let us see that next. According to Vedanta philosophy, the entire universe can be understood to be a manifestation of God when we realize that God is not a person but a vast and infinite ocean of consciousness that forms an invisible backdrop to the visible cosmos. In fact, our universe of matter, space and time can be thought of as floating in this ocean of consciousness just as a bubble floats in water. Now in our day-to-day existence, when we think of the word consciousness, which is called Chit in Sanskrit, we immediately associate it with awareness. So when we say that God is the ocean of consciousness, it means that God himself is conscious or aware of everything. In other words, all knowledge is contained in God. But is being aware or having knowledge alone sufficient to create anything? It is not, because in order to create something, we need a force, a power or Shakti as it is called in Sanskrit. So Vedanta tells us that this infinite ocean of consciousness called God is not just a mass of awareness, but it contains within it an accompanying power known as Chit Shakti or the creative force of consciousness. It is this creative force that introduces various kinds of motions or vibrations in the infinite ocean of consciousness. And it is from these varying modes of vibration of the one eternal and underlying ocean of consciousness that the entire universe ranging from inanimate matter to living beings emerges. It is for this reason that Vedanta says that God is present in all forms of creation. From the rivers to the mountains, to plants, animals and humans, God alone is present everywhere and in all things. There is no place in the universe where God is not, because the whole world arises from vibrations of one consciousness. In fact, even matter arises from consciousness. The only difference being that in matter the awareness element of the underlying consciousness is veiled or dormant, and so matter appears lifeless. Whereas as we move up the evolutionary chain from plants, animals to humans, more and more of the underlying consciousness is revealed, reaching its current highest manifestation in human beings. Okay, so now that we have gone through both the scientific and the Vedantic perspective on God and the universe, we are in a position to summarize and draw some interesting conclusions. The first point to note is that both science and Vedanta have dismissed the existence of the creator God, by which is meant the idea of God as an outside supernatural person who created the universe just as a potter creates his pots. However, unlike Vedanta, after rejecting the simplistic idea of the creator God, many Western scientists have taken a giant leap and arrived at the atheist position by dismissing God and soul entirely from the cosmos. In its place, these scientists have proposed that matter is the ultimate reality and consciousness too must somehow arise out of matter and its interactions. To this matter hypothesis of science, Vedanta says no, not only does God exist, but the soul also exists. What's more, matter is not the final reality. Because even beyond the realms of atoms and subatomic particles, in fact transcending both space and time, lies the ultimate reality, an infinite ocean of consciousness which is the real source of matter. So matter arises from consciousness. And so we arrive at the key points of distinction between science and Vedanta. While science says that the whole world can be reduced to matter and its interactions, in other words matter is primary and consciousness is secondary, Vedanta says just the opposite. It says that the whole world reduces not to matter but to consciousness. and consciousness is primary and matter is secondary. In other words, human beings are not robotic machines like science tells us, but spiritual beings. In fact, the whole universe is alive because it is a manifestation of God Himself.